decide your own, this is what we mean by narrow down. And then after I decide the topic, after I decide everything, I go and identify sources. Are there enough sources or not? And then I gather support. I start going through the topics and check if they are important, if they are supporting my own claim. You evaluate the usefulness of the books and articles you decided or you found. Are they useful? Are they supporting your claim? Are they refuting your claim? يدحضون كلامك لو يدعموا. Writing the paper, you write and revise your paper. Integrate the material. أجيب هاي المادة اللي حصلتها and I put it inside the paper. I try to mix these paragraphs that I found in books and try to support or refute. And then I prepare the paper in its final shape by presenting it with finally documented styles and techniques and the other technical issues. Sorry, not this one. Research paper. So one of the processes that I just mentioned, the 5 processes, is identifying sources. What do you mean by identify sources? I go to the internet, I go to Google Scholar, I go to Google in general. I look for the books I need for my research. Do some research about the books and articles you need. Then find those books. You need to find them. Evaluate them. Check if they are useful or no. You can check that from the abstract, from the list of the contents, from the conclusion of the book. So you can easily decide without going through every detail in the book. And take notes on the ones that do, in fact, have good material. How do we take notes here? A simple note for you. As far as we are dealing with electronic books, you make a file. For example, you have a PDF book, and then you try to create a Word document file, name the same document as the same PDF file. For example, I read the Scarlet Letter, and I have another document, Word document file called the Scarlet Letter. And then I read and I copy paste the material I need in that book. Later, I can summarize the whole book in 10, 15 pages instead of 250 pages. This is what I used to do, and it seems to be a very a successful way, because it a time-preserving way. I do not waste my time reading the whole book again and again. This is what we mean by identifying sources. Gathering support. When you identify possible sources for your paper, you make a bibliography, and then you are ready to gather support. Gather support is I collect the material from the books. I have a claim in, just like I mentioned the example of symbolism, the symbols and their significance in the Scarlet Letter. So I go to some books, I find something that proves, that supports my claim, like these symbols mean so and so. This symbol does not mean what we have now. It has another different meaning. So you need to know how to evaluate your sources, and then you need to know how to take notes efficiently. Taking notes is not in the a traditional way of writing on paper and making a notebook. And no, we prefer now, as far as we are dealing with computers and laptops, the way I told you about is I make a file. I have the same name as the book, and then I copy paste the material I need. In this way, I summarize. It is not only for the first source, the primary source, it's also for the secondary sources that we will discuss later. You need to know how to develop and refine a working outline in order that your research will always be properly directed. This is the outline. I explained it in the previous video. Evaluating your sources. Some sources can be more valuable to you than others. So this is what we need to do. Is this source important to me? Do I need the information in this source, or this is going to be just time-consuming process? So you need to decide this through going through the contents of the book, the titles of the chapters, the conclusion, in order to find out that this source is important or it's not. This is what we mean by a primary source and secondary source. Primary source is the basic source on which you are conducting the research. For example, you are doing a research on Hamlet. So the primary source is Hamlet, because you will do a research talking about characters, about revenge, about dramatic techniques in Hamlet. Secondary source is any other source, like articles or book chapters or reviews done by other writers on Hamlet. Like a scholar like Noel Polk, for example, or Harold Bloom has done some reading for Hamlet. This is a secondary source, while the text itself is the primary source. This is all and this example could explain more about primary and secondary source. I explained here a novel or a play on which we do research. Since a primary source gives you the basic material on topic, you're totally to be affected by this word is incorrect. I don't think it's there's a typing mistake here. To be affected by the biases of others who have done the research. So this explains what is, you just need to understand what do you mean by a primary source and what do you mean by secondary source. This is the content of this file. So we need to identify the tools according to which we are going to work, and then after that we could go through the details and start working. After this, I hope that we could get some other definitions for the outline, for the introduction, for the body, for paraphrasing, for plagiarism, and then we start highlighting the parts of the research. I mentioned earlier in another video what the outline, the abstract, the introduction, and the content of the introduction, like the problem statement, like the objectives, the significance, and the methodology. We need to define these things and go through everything in detail in order to understand what we are doing. Thank you.